How's it going, everyone? On today's edition of the Culips English podcast, we have a very special guest joining us. Her name is Lindie Botes, and she is a YouTuber and a polyglot and a language lover, and I was super stoked to get to talk with her. In this episode, we chatted about many different things, including, her life living abroad in many different countries, her love and passion for language learning, and she shares some of her tips with the Culips community about how to study foreign languages, and I think you'll find it really, really helpful. So without me chatting for too much longer, let's get right to the interview. Here it is, my chat with Lindie. Good evening, Lindie. Welcome to the Culips podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Where are you located right now? Where are you calling from?
I live in Singapore.
But you're not originally from Singapore, are you?
No, I was born in South Africa, and then my family and I lived in a few different countries, and then I moved to Singapore earlier this year for work.
Okay, so you haven't been there too long?
No, only about 5 or 6 months.
Only 5 or 6 months. Okay, cool. So, Lindie, you run a fairly successful YouTube channel. You have lots of subscribers and lots of videos, and this is how I came to know about you. Could you just briefly introduce your YouTube channel to our listeners?
Sure. My YouTube channel is mainly about language learning. So I like to make videos where I share language learning tips, how you can better learn a language, and sometimes I review textbooks, and I like to make videos in different languages as well.
Okay, yeah, and I guess you could say that you're a polyglot, right? A lot of the videos on your channel are about learning multiple languages, not just one foreign language.
Yes, that's right. I think there is a big polyglot community on YouTube, and lots of people like to make videos about speaking multiple languages.
And for our listeners that don't know, a polyglot is someone who can speak multiple languages. Do you know, like, if you speak 2 or 3 languages, I guess you're not a polyglot, you're just multilingual. How many languages do you need to know before you can wear that hat that says polyglot?
That's an interesting question, and many people debate the answer. Some people say it's 5 languages, some people say it's 7, but the word poly just means many, so there's no real number attached to it. But I think I would say more than 4 or 5, because you have monolingual, which is 1, bilingual, which is 2, and trilingual, which is 3. And I don't really know if people say quadrilingual or anything. So I would say from about 4 onwards, it's just easier to say the word polyglot.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that makes a lot of sense. And so, okay, how many languages can you speak, or do you know, or do you study? What do you tell people when you first meet them?
Usually I tell people it's difficult to answer that because all the languages are at different levels.
Sure.
But then I guess I can say I'm conversational in about 5 or 6, but I'm learning maybe up to 15, but they might just be very, very basic. So
right.
I can communicate in about 5 or 6.
Wow, that's amazing. And so what got you interested in languages?
Honestly, when I was a high school student or middle school student, I was never really interested in languages outside of the school classroom. So I took French and Arabic and Urdu and Afrikaans at all the different schools I was at. But I always thought languages were just a school subject. And only when I was in my last year of high school, then I discovered how much I enjoyed learning other languages outside of the school languages. So my first foreign language was Korean, and I started learning Korean in 2009. So that's almost 10 years of the language.
Yeah.
while I was learning Korean, I discovered lots of Korean singers also make songs in Japanese and
Right.
Chinese. So I
Yeah.
thought, "Oh, well, these languages must be connected somehow." And
Hmm.
that got me interested in learning Japanese and Chinese as well. And from there, it just branched out. When I realized that it is possible to learn more than one language, I decided to try the challenge.
Wow, that's so cool. Now, I have to rewind a little bit here because you mentioned just a second ago that you studied some really, I guess I would say, unique languages in high school. Like, I'm from Canada and we have to study French in high school, but you studied Arabic and Urdu and these, I guess we'd say, less commonly studied languages. How did you get that opportunity?
My father is a diplomat, so we lived in a lot of different countries because of his work. So
Okay.
when we lived in Pakistan for 3.5 years, I took Urdu and a very little bit of Spanish.
Okay.
But then we had to evacuate the country when it became dangerous for after 9/11. So
Oh,
I
right,
was
right.
able to live there longer or continue learning Urdu or Spanish.
Okay.
Then French is, I guess, a very common language in lots of schools around the world. So French just
Sure.
stuck with me throughout my school career. And
Mhm.
Afrikaans was the home language I took when I lived in South Africa.
Okay. And so, what is your first language or your, I guess you would say your native language? Is it English or Afrikaans?
I think both because we speak Afrikaans at home, but I'm English educated. So I can't do math or science in Afrikaans, but I speak Afrikaans to my family.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's such a unique experience. It sounds like you have or had a really interesting upbringing, going and traveling in all these different places and studying all these different languages.
Yes, my family and I really enjoyed it.
I bet. So, I want to get into language learning a bit more. And now, when you're studying all these different languages, it must take up a lot of your time, and you must develop a lot of good study techniques, I think, some sort of shortcuts or some hacks that work for you from, learning one language you can apply it to the next time you start a new language. And that's what I really wanted to talk about today. I was hoping that you could share some of your study tips with our listeners.
Sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, I think it's very important to have a language learning community around you. So I've learned a lot of my tips from my friends who are also language learners.
Okay.
And by watching how other polyglots do it. And a good friend of mine, Alex Rawlings, he's a British polyglot who also speaks Afrikaans, and he
Okay.
also wrote a book. So I would perhaps read books that polyglots have wrote about language learning and use those tips. But indeed, over the years, I've developed some tips that work for me. And it's important to remember that everybody has a different study style. So what works for me may not work for somebody else, and vice versa.
Right. Sure, sure.
So I'll just talk about my main tips. Mostly,
Okay.
when learning a language, it's very important to immerse yourself in the language fully. So, what
Hmm.
I like to try to do is to do everything that I normally do in my native language to try and do that in a different language.
Okay.
If I'm writing a shopping list to buy groceries, I will try and write that in Korean, for example. If I'm
Mm.
listening to music on the bus, I should listen to Korean music. If I'm watching
Mhm.
TV, I should watch Korean TV. That
Mhm.
way, you are constantly learning the language and you're getting used to native pronunciation and grammar and how things sound. It's
Sure.
also important to remember how babies learn a language. A
Mm.
mother doesn't give her baby a textbook, right? They
No,
just
of course not. No.
from hearing and repeating and from
Right.
context. If your mom points at a cup and says cup, and then she picks up another cup and says cup, you are going to learn without her giving you a book that the thing that looks like this is a cup. So I've had very successful language lessons with teachers where they only speak the language they are teaching me. So
Mm,
I'm currently learning Spanish online, and
okay.
my tutors never speak English in the lessons. That's very
Okay.
important because it forces me to try and think in the language. So
Right.
that's something else you can do. But if you are self-studying, it
Hmm.
might be difficult to try and create an environment that is only in your target language.
Right. I actually have a tip for our listeners about that too. And I don't know if you know about this because I just learned about it recently. But Netflix is awesome for lots of reasons. But one of the things that I learned about Netflix recently is that it's usually only with the Netflix created content, but you can choose an audio setting that gives you audio descriptions. So if there's a scene with no dialogue, let's say somebody's at a cafe and they're drinking a coffee, the narrator will actually narrate all of the actions that the character is doing. So if the character's name is Bobby, the narrator will say, "Oh, Bobby is lifting his cup. He puts his cup to his mouth. He takes a sip of coffee. He puts the cup down." And you get this tons of great input and a really nice description of the scene. So I've found Netflix to be really, really helpful for making kind of an immersive environment. It's really nice.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that's excellent for the visually impaired as well. And
Sure.
I know a good language learner friend of mine is actually visually impaired, and she has to rely only on podcasts and things like Netflix that have those descriptions to learn languages. And it's a very good method indeed.
Yeah, I've been watching some dramas with it. It's been nice.
Cool.
um, okay, Lindy, you mentioned that you've been studying Korean for almost 10 years now, and I've been studying Korean for about 6 years now. And I guess that's how I found out about you originally, was searching for, Korean study stuff on YouTube. And one thing that struck me about your Korean, and of course, I'm not like a native speaker or anything, but I did think that your Korean sounded very good. And one thing that I noticed was that your mannerisms were super Korean. You had Korean, like the way that Koreans breathe when they speak is very different than the way that English speakers breathe when we speak. And the way that English speakers pause is different than Korean speakers pause. And I noticed these things and I was like, wow, they're so Korean. And actually, I showed your video to my Korean friend and she said the same thing. Wow, the reason her Korean is so good is that she imitates Korean speakers while she speaks. And so I was wondering if you could talk to that a bit about the importance of mastering the gestures of your target language.
So when I was at school, my brothers and I would always practice imitating different accents
Mm,
as a joke, and we used to put on plays playing different characters. And I think that is where I started learning the importance of an accent. And honestly, accents only really come from imitation. You have to
mm-hmm,
sit and try and copy how the person sounds. In the
mm-hmm,
beginning, you may sound funny, but try to force yourself to copy one person's way of speaking.
mm-hmm,
And often, Korean speakers may have a particular accent when they speak English,
mm-hmm.
and Americans or Canadians may have a particular accent when they speak Korean. So, what I like to do is put that in the inverse. So, I will try and think, how does a Korean person speak English? What kind of words do they pronounce in what kind of way? And then I'll take that accent and I'll try and replicate it when I'm speaking Korean. Because the way your mouth is formed or the way you pronounce certain sounds is how it should be pronounced natively when you're speaking the target language. So I try to focus a lot on copying people's pronunciation, which is where I think it helped me to get a natural accent. But really, the biggest thing for me was spending time with lots of Koreans. Um,
Mm,
I think people If I may give a specific example to Korea,
Sure.
in the Korean school system, students spend a lot of time just taking exams and reading from books and doing comprehensions, but they don't spend enough time speaking. And
Hmm.
speaking to someone, speaking with someone is really where you are going to pick up on those nuances of hand gestures and pauses and expressions like wow or those kinds of things you will never learn in a textbook. You will only
Yeah.
learn from talking to people. So
Right. Right.
try and put yourself in a situation where you can practice with someone. You can go to a language exchange event.
Mhm.
Big cities in the world have language exchange events where you can go and practice languages with somebody. You can phone a friend. You can find a teacher on Skype. As long as you are getting conversational practice, you will keep hearing the language and you will naturally start to imitate it later.
Hmm. Yeah, that's such a good point because if you're just getting your input from TV, you don't really get these things. These are the parts of speech that we edit out of TV, right?
Right.
The people wondering, oh, what do I have to say, or the being confused, or we call it hedging, where you're kind of delaying your speech. This is all edited out of TV. So if you don't have those real life face-to-face conversations, you can't learn it. And of course, it's not in a textbook either.
Right. Yes. And you really do pick up on I mean, your speech sounds very natural when you are using things like or and
Hmm.
it'll sound very strange to somebody if you are speaking Korean and suddenly you will throw some English in like how do you say that? If you
Hmm.
learn those filler phrases in Korean, you'll sound more natural. And a textbook never taught me how to say 뭐라고 하지? But only speaking to Korean people, I heard that when they are thinking, they'll say 뭐라고 하지? Or 뭐라 그러지? Then I was like, oh, so that's what you say when you're thinking. And then I
Right,
tried to
right.
use it, and it's a lot better than Korean, Korean, Korean. How do you say that? So try and learn those
Yeah,
filler phrases. That will make you sound a lot more natural.
I agree. And this goes for any language, of course, not just for Korean.
Absolutely.
Okay, Lindy, I wanted to change gears a little bit and talk about what you do. Because as far as I know, you're a designer. Is this correct? Do I have this information correct?
I am a
Okay.
designer.
You're a designer, and I've seen videos on your channel about minimalism as well. Could you just briefly describe, because maybe some of our listeners don't know, what minimalism means in the context of a lifestyle, a minimalist lifestyle?
Yes. Minimalism is based on the premise that you only keep what is very important to you and you get rid of the rest. So the way we are raised in a capitalist life, in a consumerist life, is that the more you buy, the happier you will be. Minimalism is the opposite of that. Not necessarily the less you have, the happier you are, but it's just on only having the things that are important to you and only keeping things that are meaningful to you. You can apply it to your wardrobe, for example. If you only buy good quality clothes that will last you long, you will be happy with your wardrobe and it will last longer and it will save you money. Instead of buying the latest fashions every week, you just keep important specific pieces that can last you years. That's a practical example of minimalism.
Cool. And as someone, myself, who lives in a foreign country, I think I practice this lifestyle by default because I just hate moving things around.
Yes, I was actually slightly sad when I came to Singapore because at one stage I had over 700 language, but when I came here, I couldn't take all of them with me. So
Yeah.
I put as many as I could in my suitcase and I mailed myself 3 boxes. But now I only have one tiny bookshelf of language books. But it's been good because I'm focusing on the books that are important and the books I'll use, and the other ones are not collecting dust or being useless.
Right. for sure. And so as a designer, I would imagine that you're a highly creative person. And I was curious, I don't know if you have an answer for this or not, but do you think there's any connection between your work as a designer and your minimalist lifestyle and language learning? Does this influence or impact the way that you study languages at all?
Yes. Previously, I think with my creative brain, I always got excited about so many different things, and I would get frustrated because I would buy as many textbooks as I could and try out as many apps, and I was just using way too many things that were confusing me. So now that I've started a new language, Spanish, I'm trying to stick to only 2 or 3 main resources so that I can stay more focused.
Okay.
So I'm only using online lessons, the Duolingo app, and watching a series on Netflix and listening to music. Those are my only sources of input now, because I
Okay.
know I will waste time trying to look for new things. So
I've
I guess
yeah.
I'm trying to apply a minimalist approach in terms of how many books and resources I have. I don't even own a single textbook for Spanish. I'm doing everything digitally.
Wow. So I guess it's more quality over quantity.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Oh,
And
I
then
see.
in terms of using languages in my work, I've always been inspired by Korean, Japanese, and Chinese typography. So a lot of my
Okay.
personal graphic design work will be exploring different ways to write characters, or making posters of Japanese songs, or how can I visually represent what the language sounds like to me.
That's really cool. Lindy, I just realized that I totally forgot to ask you which languages you study, and I'm sure some of our listeners are dying to know. Could you just tell us what languages you've studied in the past or are studying now, aside from Spanish?
So home language is Afrikaans and then English. And then I guess chronologically, it would be Urdu, French, Arabic, Korean, Mandarin, Japanese, Vietnamese, Indonesian, Malay, Turkish, Hungarian, Spanish. I think that is it. Then I've dabbled here and there with other languages like Mongolian and Finnish and Estonian, but or Norwegian, but I just keep those to the side. So right now my main languages are Mandarin Chinese because I live in Singapore, Korean and
Mhm.
Japanese because they're my most fluent and I want to keep them on a good level, and
Mhm.
Spanish because it's a new language.
Oh, that's so cool. um, so, Lindy, I don't want to take up too much of your time here, but just before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about YouTube because I love YouTube so much. It's my favorite website, probably. And what's it like being a YouTuber?
It's very strange when people call me a YouTuber, because I never started my channel with the intention of becoming famous or being a YouTuber. I only started it to share my love of learning languages and to meet other language learners. So when my channel started growing, it was a very strange feeling. And sometimes people recognize me in the street, and
Whoa.
that makes me think the world is very small, but I'm also happy that there are so many people learning languages. So I guess in a sense, the fame is still something I'm getting used to. When people ask for my like for a photo with me, or when they recognize me on the street, that's very strange. But I feel very comfortable making videos and sharing my love of languages with people, and it's such a wonderful way to meet other language learners. So it's been a very good experience so far.
That's awesome. So, could you let everyone know what your channel address is so that our listeners could come and visit your page and watch some of your videos?
Yeah, thank you. So you can just type in my name, Lindie Botes. That's my channel name. So my name is Lindie, and my surname Botes is Botes. So you can just find me if you search Lindie Botes on YouTube, And I also have a website, just lindiebotes.com.
Okay. Lindie, it's very interesting. Your family name and my family name are just one letter difference. Mine is Bates, Bates. But very different pronunciation, though, between the two.
Yeah, my surname is actually Dutch.
Dutch, okay. That's interesting. I wonder if somewhere down the line we have a common ancestor or something, because I think I have a little Dutch heritage as well. So,
wow, very interesting.
Yeah, maybe 1,000 years ago or something. We had a great grandmother together or something. Anyway, Lindie, I think we'll wrap it up here. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And I do want to encourage all of our listeners to go check out your channel because it's super interesting to watch your journey with all of these languages, and some of the other topics that you vlog about are super cool as well. So definitely, guys, please go check out Lindie's channel. And Lindie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It was really great to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. See you later.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that chat as much as I did. Don't forget to go visit Lindie's social media accounts and her website. All of the information you need for that is on our website. You can find those links on our website, culips.com, culips.com. We also made a study guide for this episode, and we think you would really benefit from studying with it. It's got a transcript, some explanations of the important vocabulary that we used in this episode, and lots of other good stuff. So to download the study guide, just visit our website, culips.com. If you like Culips, please help us out by leaving us a nice review and ranking on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It will help new English learners discover Culips and help us to grow. Okay, that's it for now. I will be back soon with another episode, and we'll talk to you then. Bye.